constitutional amendments to protect or expand abortion rights passed in 7 of the 10 states where they appeared on the ballot this week. In Arizona and Missouri, voters effectively restored their reproductive rights. Meanwhile, you got voters in Maryland, Montana, Nevada, New York, and Colorado who passed measures formally enshrining existing rights into their state's constitution. Joining us now is Missourians for Constitutional Freedom campaign manager, Rachel Sweet. She is a success story this week. Greetings, Rachel.
Rachel, you are a success story this week. You have been a success story in the past. I have been following your career and what it is that you have been able to do. Help us understand what this means for people in Missouri and what it was you did in your organizing that you found effective, that work, that can be transposed onto other efforts.
Well, that's very kind, Alicia. Thank you. And I'm happy to be with you all today. I'm glad that Missouri, for once, can be a bright spot as we deal with the results of this really historic election. So in Missouri, women in my state are living under a total abortion ban with no exceptions for rape, incest, or women's health. So what we were able to do on Tuesday and in, frankly, the years leading up to this election was really build a diverse coalition of Democrats, Republicans, independent voters, and bring them together to support reproductive freedom, because our state's ban goes too far and is really out of step with the values of the majority of Missourians and the majority of Americans. So some of the strategies that we used are really just going into those communities, sometimes creating these strange bedfellow type coalitions, working with faith leaders across the state, working with physicians across the state to just make sure voters really understood how extreme and how out of step with their values Missouri's ban actually is. And I think that continuing to sort of reach across the aisle to communicate with voters across the political spectrum using shared values is something that we're all going to have to do for the next 2 years, 4 years, and into the future if we want to continue to protect these rights across the country.
Can I just ask one follow-up question? What exactly did you all, what was your messaging? What did you say? Because there are people that voted for this, but then they voted for Donald Trump, right? There are people that voted for this, but then they also checked the box for the Republican Attorney General. So, what was the messaging?
Yeah, that's a great question, Simone. Yeah, I would say that, when folks are voting for whether it's someone to be the next president of the United States or their representative in the U.S. Senate, they are bringing a lot with them into the ballot box. They are thinking about a variety of issues. And I think what's so great about these ballot measure campaigns is we can just focus on how do voters feel about abortion rights and about the state of access where they live. So some of the key messages that we utilized in this campaign were really bringing home sort of the devastating consequences of the ban, making it clear whether that was coming from a physician or a woman in Missouri who needed access to abortion and was denied that care, who got access to abortion before the ban took effect, and making it clear that, this is not just an issue that affects a small percent of the population. This affects all of us, especially women who may not see themselves as someone who would ever need access to abortion care. This impacts Missourians' ability to get access to the standard care for miscarriages, it impacts the ability of doctors to treat pregnancy complications. And then by a combination of telling those stories and using sort of those, those first person narratives to get voters to see the consequences and empathize with people on an issue where they might feel conflicted, we coupled that with this really overarching message of personal freedom. We need to keep politicians out of our doctors' offices. The government should not be making these personal, private medical decisions for you and your family. And I think that is why we were able to be successful, frankly, on a night where, we saw results up and down the ballot that are not conducive with supporting abortion rights and access. But in states like Missouri, the only way that we can win is by building these broad coalitions. And because of how extreme Missouri's abortion ban is, women in our state need relief now, right? We need to act regardless of what is going on at the federal level.
So speaking of the federal level and what comes next, because there is a next that is coming on the abortion issue, which was played down and actually in many cases lied about by Republicans with respect to a national ban. The Detroit Free Press, in an opinion piece, writes this: for 4 Republican men running for seats in the U.S. Congress this year told Michiganders that they wouldn't vote for a national abortion ban. 2 of them won. I expect it won't be long until we find out whether Barrett and James's renaissance on abortion rights was sincere, or the sort of thing a candidate says when he really wants to win. This is reminiscent of members of our judiciary sitting before the U.S. Senate being asked explicitly about abortion and referencing their loyalty and fealty to stare decisis and the status quo and the rights already enshrined over this 50-year period of abortion rights in this country. And then when given that moment, and the Dobbs decision, throwing all of that out. I suspect the same will be true here, that those members who came in saying, hey, no, we're not touching this, that I will not vote for a national ban will. That will then directly impact the work that you just did, accomplished in your state. How do you look at that moment, and what are some of the democracy-oriented sort of challenges against that you and others around the country can band together around to prevent that from happening?
Yeah, that's a great question. We know that there are a lot of potential threats from the next Trump administration and from a Republican-controlled Congress, whether it is, like you said, folks walking into the chamber and passing a national abortion ban, whether it is the FDA possibly revoking approval of mifepristone, the most common medication that is used for medication abortion in this country, whether it's invoking the Comstock Act. There are a ton of threats that are potentially coming from the federal level. But what, again, was so important to us in Missouri is that women in my state are already living under the reality of a total abortion ban. And so for us, we know that we need to act now, regardless of what's going on in Washington, D.C. And I think as we head into the next few years and are thinking globally about the fight for abortion rights and access, we need to make sure that we are continuing to hold these legislators accountable to the promises that they made out here on the campaign trail. Because, as you said, Michael, is that true, right? Are these folks really going to sit here and not cave under the pressure to pass a national ban on abortion? I'm very skeptical. So I think we need to continue to hold our elected officials accountable. We need to continue to organize in our communities, especially in red states where we know that folks are already feeling the effects of these extreme abortion restrictions. And honestly, we need to find ways that we are supporting the infrastructure that helps patients get the care that they need, particularly in these really challenging circumstances. But from the perspectives of someone who does this work in the states, we know that we can't make every decision based on what might happen in Washington, D.C. And that is why we're still, out here and are going to continue to do this work, because something that is passed by the U.S. Congress can later be overturned by the U.S. Congress. Whereas the things that we are doing with these constitutional amendments is really enshrining these protections in the state constitution so that we can continue to sort of move and operate around the changes that might come over the next 10, 20, 50 years at the national level. But I think there's definitely work to be done to make sure that we are channeling this grassroots energy that we've seen around these ballot measures into the next thing. And the next thing for everyone might not be another ballot measure campaign, right? It is going to have to be this accountability work. And it is going to have to be making sure folks understand that you can't just go into the voting booth and vote for one of these ballot measures and vote for a politician who's going to take your rights away the next day.